So of course we're at the introduction, and right away we have two compromises that we're making. If you're familiar with the original recording, of course you are, you know that it's played in the high region. It's impractical in this scenario to play it up here. I lowered it down by an octave to play it in this area. The other compromise is the exact notes themselves. He plays an interesting pattern on the guitar, which you may have already checked out because you're an avid fan of this music and you learned to play it. And maybe the notes don't match exactly. But what I've learned over the many years is that when you perform for an audience, you want to give them the essence of this song. It's not so much about copying the notes exactly, which would be great if we could, but rather giving them something that's close enough. And I'm not saying that in a kind of a degrading way for the music. Close enough really means that you are reaching somebody. You know, if you are working so hard to try to get the part just right, but you can't do any of the other parts at the same time, you know, I'm thinking maybe it's better to try to play, you know, the part slightly modified, but you can get in some of the other parts. So what are the parts? So first of all, we have that little arpeggiation picking part. This whole business. But it's played over 3 different chords, right? It's played over the D, it's played over the C, and it's played over the G. So my solution was to get them all in this area. And if you're playing this basic D-shaped chord here, you can get that, you know, that picking pattern mostly down and quite easily be able to switch bass notes. So same thing now, but transfer this finger to the C. And now, just move this finger up to G. And then I start the song right away. If you're familiar with the recording again, with the original, you know that they actually double that. And what they do by doubling it is really an old, and you know, as old as it gets in music, compositional tool. They're layering the song. The song starts with just the guitar. The second part brings in that bass and the drums, and the third time around, the whole band comes in. That's called building. That's tension. You're building on something. I don't have that with the guitar. I'm just one guy. I don't have a drummer. I don't have a bass player. It's just me and my fingers and the 6 strings. So for me, it's good enough to play this once. If you wanted to, you can play it twice, but you won't be adding a lot of new musical material as such. But you have conveyed, if you're sitting there at a restaurant like I do, I play a lot of restaurant gigs, and playing this, you're immediately, somebody's going to raise an eyebrow. Oh, I know that song. And that's all you want. That's what you really want. You want to be able to connect with a listener. When you're sitting there practicing the song, somebody walks into the room and says, hey, I know what you're playing. That's Guns N' Roses, man. That sounds great. You've done your job. And it's great to be able to do. It's very satisfying to be able to play solo guitar arrangement this way. So with all that in mind, we understand that we're going to be compromises. We're not playing the exact transcription. We're not playing the same key. We're not playing the introduction 3 times like the original because it doesn't make sense for us as a solo instrument to do so. So we played the introduction. The next section is played up in the 5th position. I chose this. I think this is a very full, or not a very full, but it's a full enough sound and not too advanced, I would say, that it would get in the way of you learning how to play the song. I could have also done this. This has a nice consonant sound to it, but actually, harmonically speaking, it's not a full chord. This is your root, that's the 5, that's another root, that's another 5. So it's very full sounding from the standpoint that it has a lot of notes in it, but they're doubled notes. This chord right here also contains the F sharp, so you're getting a fuller harmonically sounding chord. And that whole part right there is playable right here with the open D. Now, inadvertently, I'm demonstrating now something that I wanted to mention that is extremely important in my arrangement. Actually, it's the bottom, the most biggest bottom foundation, upon which all my arrangements are built. And this is the idea that you want to play the melody as it needs to be played. That's the melody. It sounds more or less like what the vocal would have done, while at the same time playing a simple, very simple bass line. That's all that you need to do. Da, 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 da. Pardon my singing voice, but you get the idea. Each of these two parts has a different rhythm. The melody is full of syncopation. It has to be. It follows a set of lyrics. It's a pre-composed melody. And the bass, at the same time, is very simple and steady and on the beat. So if I'm going to play it without the chords, it would sound like this. That's an important point right there where I stopped. That last A note right there was syncopated and came on before I hit this D note. I can't stress enough how important this is for solo guitar arranging. I just want to say something funny here. Imagine a piano player did this with one finger playing that melody and one finger playing that bass line. We would not think of him much as a piano player. But as guitar players, when we do this, we're like a genius, right? That sounds great on the guitar. It's not expected of the guitar. Not a lot of people are doing it. Well, you're doing it. I'm doing it. So this is great. We can do something that not a lot of people are doing. In terms of harmony, well, add whatever is available. We know it's a D chord. I have these notes available to me. So the bass and melody start at the same time. So at this exact moment, I can throw in these two extra notes. Now at this point, the melody moves on to the second string. So, well, I play the melody, and I have this note to accompany it with. Listen to that melody and just how syncopated it is. All these G notes were syncopated while I was, very steadily holding down the C note. That's your arrangement right there. Everything else is truly extra. And that extra is some of those chord notes that we have in between the melody and the bass note. So what do we do with those? Well, I have a solution for that. Something that I do. I arpeggiate these chord notes very gently, very delicately underneath, between the melody and the bass in the underlying subdivision, because those subdivided eighth notes are the rhythmic engine of this song, something that goes on in the background all the time. Kind of floats underneath the song. So let me stop here because I did something interesting. I hammered this note and then I slid down here later. Again, compromises. We already said that we are not able to, reproduce a full arrangement of a full band, let alone a human voice. But as guitar players, we do have some expressive tools. Some of those include hammer-ons. The melody note is this, but if you hammer into it, it sounds a little bit more expressive. The next melody note is going to be here. Through here, if I do a little slide, that sounds a little more expressive. So even within the confines of this rather simplified version of the song, we can find some tools of expression that will kind of elevate the song to more than just a simple arrangement. So from the top of the melody. Now I mentioned something about arpeggiating the chords. The melody itself is very busy. It's a lot of eighth notes. That, interestingly enough, tells you that not only are the pitches important because that's the melody, but they have a rhythmic function. Your melody now is keeping your time. It's an interesting thing to think about. But when I finish this phrase, I did that. Notice how busy the melody is. So that alone provided us with a lot of rhythmic subdivision. And then I came here, and you know, it's a little play on that delay effect that they have on the vocal. Why not throw it in? If you're hearing something in the song, and this is an important point I also want to make. This is a cool arrangement, I think. But if you listen to the song, if you try to and want to add something, if you hear something in the song that's missing or that you think is kind of iconic and you want to add it, feel free to modify these arrangements. They're not in the stone, they're in the tab, but they're not in the stone, you know. Feel free to adapt, you know, change them to fit your style of playing, or to add anything that you hear in the song that you wish was there. So this is one thing that I thought was kind of humorous almost, because that's actually not really the melody, it's the delay effect on the vocal. Continuing, it repeats. A lot of sitting on that G note. So again, here's another interesting point. I don't know, while I'm playing it, I don't even remember what the lyrics are. I really don't. And every time the melody plays, it's with different lyrics. What does that mean? It means that the exact melody depends on which syllable happens exactly when. Is that important when you're playing instrumentally? Maybe not so much. So what am I playing? I'm probably playing what can be fairly described as a good approximation of the melody. Does it fit the exact syllables of whatever lyrics? I don't know. It's not important. And I've never had a complaint from an audience member that somehow my playing didn't match a lyric. It doesn't make any sense. We're playing an instrumental version. So this is the second time. An A chord, and I'm fingering it a little bit unusual. I could play it like this. It doesn't sound right. This sounds good. You could play it with a bar. I like the sound of fretted notes up the neck blended with open strings. I think the open string sound has a better tone than a fretted one. So this is a good sound that I like. And that's your melody note. That's lone A note on top. And that's your melody note right there. So these chord shapes, just the shape themselves, provide the melody note. So notice that this melody note was syncopated. Again, from here. Musically, that's important because the note was syncopated. That's how the melody goes. And the bass came in later. But something else that I noticed that you'll want to, you know, notice as well is when I played this note, I didn't have my bass note ready. See? This finger is still floating in the air. That's a great opportunity for us. We're trying to be opportunistic here. You know, I wasn't quick enough to grab the whole chord right away. That's okay. You know, make sure you get the melody. And then in that little time gap in between, find that bass note. And then you can kind of reference right there the introduction, of course. And that goes twice. And that melody second time is the D, so it's kind of helps close the phrase. Now we have, of course, the famous guitar interlude where he plays what is a blend between a pre-written line, to the way I hear it, and an improvised one, because he plays this twice and they're both a little bit different. The first time is more understated, the second time he elaborates a little bit more, and we can try to make a reference to that. Let's see what that melody is. So we're back to this position. Notice what I'm doing. After I hit this note, I'm arpeggiating. Because I always want to hear da, 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 da. Now one thing I want to make sure to do is when I play the melody to make sure that it jumps out. So I'm playing it at I'm emphasizing it more, playing it a little bit harder so it jumps out more. And the arpeggiated notes are played a little softer in volume, so they're more in the background. And that wraps up basically one complete cycle of verse and chorus. And then you can play the second. And maybe you can add a little articulation on your own. Change the timing of the melody a little bit. That's entirely up to you. You know, for now, I know this is all new to you, so you just stick with the tab. But something I want you to keep in the back of your mind is that these arrangements are flexible. The melody is originally sung by a human voice, and he does a lot of different stuff that is not very strict. So, you know, feel free to play with articulation a little bit. Changing the melody a little bit. Slightly different pattern there. See, just simple movement like that adds color. And again. Now we're at the second time of playing that guitar line. You know, really the two parts, the two verse, you know, the verse chorus are identical as far as being written out or whatever, but the differences are, of course, in the original song, in the lyrics. And as far as we're concerned, we can change the articulation from one to the next. And these really are all the parts that we have for this arrangement. I hope you enjoy practicing these and performing the song to your friends and family and getting a huge applause, and I'll see you on the next arrangement.